down, and we're going to shut Google down because you don't have a revenue model for this company and you're just burning up capital. And so they said, okay, we'll start taking advertising. So they went down the slippery slope of greed and Wall Street and shareholder value and all that crap.
Yeah.
But that book, please buy that book. It just came out. It was just reviewed in Foreign Affairs. It's called The Age of Surveillance Capital. And it's totally, I mean, it's a blockbuster. It pulls it all together and looks at all of the algorithms that change our behavior, you know, and prey on our cognitive weaknesses and all of those things. And then the other book I also highly recommend that I reviewed with it. It's on our website right now on ethicalmarkets.com. And it's called Don't Be Evil.
Oh, yeah.
And it's written by a Financial Times business editor, Rana Foroohar, and she is very sharp. I loved her last book, which was called Makers and Takers, which was all about how Wall Street is destroying and predatory on Main Street. So she's a very clear thinker. And she's looking too at all of these Silicon Valley business models. And the business model has to be changed. These companies have to be broken up. And right now in the Congress, both sides of the aisle in the Congress are going after Facebook and Google and Amazon and Microsoft and all of them to break them up on antitrust grounds. I mean, they never should have been allowed to buy WhatsApp and Instagram and all of that. Disgrace, absolute disgrace. So that's going very quickly now, and the new models are that they'd be regulated as public utilities.
Do you think that will actually happen? Because they didn't close down Microsoft as it gobbled everybody up, and they let these companies get huge. I mean, there's clearly...
I know, but what's happened now is that everybody's, even the children of members of Congress, are being trapped by these psychological algorithms that are designed to addict not only children, but adults. And Foroohar says in her book that the reason she got so keenly involved with this is her 10-year-old son. She realized that he had become addicted to a video game when she got her bill. She got this enormous bill.
It wasn't mine.
So those two books, please read those two books. And I've been covering this too. We had a conference here 2 years ago with our new partner, the World Academy of Art and Science. And this is really interesting academics from all over the world. And so they're our new partners. And we had a conference on the future of democracy challenged in the digital age. And we kicked all of this around because obviously Putin, he was quoted.
Hazel, we're probably not going to have much of a digital age at this rate. I mean, a question which I've been asking people, which is quite this year, and I've experimented. I think I might have tried it on Ivan earlier in the year, is to ask people a very simple question, which gets away from some of the sort of headlines that we see every day about climate change and Extinction Rebellion. It's just simply to ask the question, do you think oil will run out? Do you think oil will run out? Now, I have been fascinated because I've asked this question of people who are managers, okay, with degrees, who have said no. It just comes straight out and said no, as if it's an infinite resource. And then we speak for another minute or two and they said, oh, well, yes, okay, it's a finite resource, obviously. And then we get in the conversation a little bit, and then you ask the next question of everybody. And anybody who's watching this, I ask, when do you think oil will run out? Now, most people will think about that for a little bit. At the sort of more, let me say, optimistic end of the spectrum, people are talking 50 years. That's BP's projection in the World Energy Report. And then you get the more cynical end of the spectrum, which is people like me who would say 10 years, or Extinction Rebellion people who will say, well, in 10 years, we're going to have system breakdown, so it won't matter anymore because there just won't be the ability to move it around. But either way, whether we're looking at 10 or 20 or 50 years, we have very little time to change. And we need to actually withdraw ourselves from all of these technological luxuries, which we want to preserve. Because if we have system breakdown, complete system breakdown, we will lose books. We will lose data. Most people don't have any of their knowledge in paper anymore. We're lucky, we have a few books in their library. Yes. They've got it on their computer. No energy, no computer, no power, no telecommunications, no cars. And it's not just the fuel. Everybody thinks it's about heating. It's about the little widget, the plastic case of your modem, the spectacles that you put on your nose. I will be blind. I literally cannot see a thing without these. And they're 100% plastic. Now, if we don't start to think very carefully about how we're going to transition to a world where we can see us living in harmony with nature, well, then I think I'm very lucky because I'm in the middle of nowhere and there's a big stone wall around me. And people are going to be coming down the road to look for my vegetables.
Well, I don't think that the time frame, I would have to say that I'm not worried about oil running out. No. Because the time frame of the next 10 years is much more to do with the permafrost melting and belching methane and climate, all of the disruption of the climate, sea level rise, and you know, all of the pollution, not just CO2, but all the other forms of pollution. And I agree with you about the fragility of the so-called information age. I just wrote an article after all of the big fires in California, and where suddenly Pacific Gas and Electric had to turn off everybody's electricity. So you were having blackouts in Silicon Valley. And so my article was called Silicon Valley Karma. And it's about faith in electricity. I mean, I think the electricity is shifting to solar and wind because it's cheaper now than oil, and it's cheaper than coal. So in this country, this is one of the enormous shifts that I've been, looking at the last 10 years. But the fact that you're absolutely right, that every one of those masters of the universe, Silicon Valley, if you pull the plug out, they're dead.
Yeah.
They can't move a muscle.
Yeah.
And I think what we're seeing is, you're absolutely right. There's a massive transition to make to post-fossil fuel. But actually, what we're already seeing, certainly in the UK and in Repsol, who've just done their accounts, who are a fossil fuel company, have had to downgrade their assets because fossil fuels are not going to have any value in 10 years' time because no one's going to use them.
They're stranded assets.
Whether they're going to run out or not. And what the challenge we've got is, how do we make that transition? Because if you own a fossil fuel company like Repsol, you have to start writing down your assets because you've got them in your balance sheet at a very high number. And if you wrote all those assets down to zero today of all the oil companies, an awful lot of banks would go bust, never mind the oil companies going bust. So,
you're right.
I mean, I'm being very simplistic about it, and I'm no accounting expert, but from my understanding, it really, we are in, the financial sector understands that we have a serious issue now in transitioning to a post-fossil fuel world.
And I agree with you. Yeah.
The banking sector and the financial sector understand this, and they are now concerned about how we can help everyone make that transition in an orderly way and not in the kind of way you've described, which would be very damaging for all people. The damage to human life and society would be enormous.
Una, do you think when governments realize that this is an issue, that they will nationalize the assets as quickly as possible, when they all cop on to the fact that they have oil running out and they need it? and it becomes a national asset.
I think
not
it's
running out.
I don't think governments have any doubt or lack of understanding, but there are not votes in this area at the moment because the public do not understand and appreciate what's going on. And then until the public see this as more important, we won't get electorates voting for the measures that might be necessary, which is why it's the financial sector, I think, that is driving the change. Certainly in the UK and across the world, that I think is happening in many other countries, China as well.
I have to say, I'm very cynical about that, having been in the business and having started my journey here in the financial services, trying to get people to invest. I met so many SRI and ethical fund managers who were not ethical.
Yeah. And I completely understand where you're coming from, Tom, but I think the city has really woken up to the reality of what we're facing.
The only change, I think what you said about the voters, the people, when people know, when people wake up, because it is only people that are going to be able to make the change. Governments are not helpful. They stand in the way. They've proven that time and time again. Companies, I think very interesting, you raised this issue, you started talking about company and money. I wanted to raise the issue of the bottom line, okay? The profit. We've got to look after the shareholders. It occurred to me recently, and I have to say this with some great embarrassment since I've been a financial engineer for what, 30, 40 years. The bottom line, the shareholder interest. What a load of rubbish. That is the other side of that coin is that it is up to the directors in the company to defraud all the other stakeholders. If they're only interested in the bottom line, then their interest is to defraud their suppliers so that they get more stuff for cheaper. It is in their interest to defraud their customers so that they can sell less stuff for more. It is in their interest to defraud their employees and pay them nothing and bad wages. It is a license to criminal behavior, this bottom line notion. And I think it just it taints the culture of...
Well, it's against the law in this country anyway, because the UK Companies Act section 172 requires every director in every decision they make to consider the interests of all stakeholders, not just today's, but every future stakeholder. And there is more and more requirement through the regulators. Now companies have to report transparently on how they're actually doing that and how the decisions they've made in the last year have been considerate of those issues. And they're only beginning to have to report on it, but the situation is that having had that in law now for 12 years and companies not having been so transparent about how they're doing it, they are now required to do that. So from next year, you will see all UK listed companies having to do this.
Well, have a look.
Happening in the US.
Very cynical.
But it is.
I'm very cynical about them. I think they've been lying to us before and they'll lie again. Are you familiar with River Simple at all? Because they have an unusual board structure where they have, it's almost membership representation on the board of the different groups. I mean, perhaps you'd like to share a bit about that.
It has a separate board made up of each of the stakeholders, and each stakeholder has its own board. And then those boards come together in their supervisory oversight board. Yeah, I'm very familiar with that.
I mean, it is quite interesting because as an investor, you can go in there and buy shares, but you are told right up front that there are employees who get to vote. They may not own any shares, but they will be voting about the direction of the company. And so some investors will sort of get a little bit, what? But I like it. And I like it. Another one, of course, is the membership, the cooperative approach. So the Visa, DHOC and all of them, which again, it makes people be honest. It brings an element.
Well, Tom, you mentioned co-ops. Very few people know that there are more people on this planet employed in cooperative enterprises than in all of the commercial corporations in the world put together. So go for the details on that are at un.org. The United Nations had the Year of Cooperatives in 2012. So it's really the for-profit bottom line corporations which are the anomaly. And so let's go, more of us go with co-ops. I mean, we shifted our bank account, our company bank account years ago to a credit union, which these are cooperatives. And credit unions all over the USA are taking over from commercial banks. And we now have in 14 states, we have new laws either on the books or being considered for public banking, where you just do away with Wall Street altogether. And you keep the taxpayers' money at home in the state and use it to fund the local banks to support all of the infrastructure without paying interest. And so I am a member of the advisory board of the Public Banking Institute in the US. And if you go on their website, publicbankinginstitute.org, you'll see now, I think the latest state is New Jersey, and they're going to have a New Jersey public bank. This all happened in the US during the Great Depression, when Wall Streeters were closing down on the family farmers in the Midwest that they lent money to. And they got together, particularly in North Dakota, it was where it started 100 years ago. And they have had the Bank of North Dakota, where all of the tax revenues from the state taxpayers go into the Bank of North Dakota, right there in Fargo. You can look it up. And they've been the most successful bank in the US, and they provide the working capital for all of the local community banks and credit unions. So I think that the most important thing is not to be cynical. To be cynical is really losing faith in the possibility that we humans can learn. And I think that we humans can learn, and I think that the glass is half full.
I mean, we had a few people in the audience here murmuring, and I think I share their murmur, which is I am cynical, and I think the system has to change. And I think the system
does. Of course it does, but you don't have to be a cynic to say that the system has to change. Those are two very different things. I think that I've worked for 40 years to help change the system, but it's no point just sitting there and saying the system has to change, but I'm a cynic. Go get you can do the work now, and you can start a public banking movement.
Well, hang on, Hazel, there's no way I'm getting into banking. There's no way I'm going to bank. Not a chance. Okay, I will very happily invest other people's money because I'm honest, and that's the only reason I'm going to do it. But get into banking, that's the thing that the computer can do. That's all we need, because the computer can do that. We don't want to put poor little people in between shoving bits of paper. But what I do think is that cynicism is very healthy, because otherwise we accept. Come. Sorry, I got to say, that was my Cork visitor. This is Ursula, all the way from Cork.
I think
one of the ones who got me going.
We can be skeptical without being cynical. To me, cynicism is a sin.
Fair enough. Well, I'm a very sinful boy, and I'm going to go over and grab myself a drink soon to prove it. But what I do want to do before we wrap up, hey, Fika and Albie.
There was British in America, and then there's
England.
Tom, I want to say I agree with Hazel. I think if one becomes cynical, it becomes very often a bar to making the very changes that are absolutely necessary, which is not to be a hopeless optimist, okay? But to actually, take the challenge that is presented and to see in the area in which one is competent, okay, to do something about it as a representative template for others to be able to follow. Because I think the what I suspect is needed right now are people who are able to live within the present system, but to come up with the alternatives that other people can follow. And, you know, of course, people can think that that's completely, you know, it's optimistic beyond any reasonable doubt. But I think it's the only way, actually, that we even have a chance to address it. And where I do think things are changing is that when you look at in California at the fires, or in Australia now and the fires and the drought and the rising water, people now, this is not just some sort of theological argument for Laudato Si, okay, that the Pope is presenting. These are real consequences that are happening to people in their everyday lives and to their neighbors. And the question is, when your house and your property has been obliterated and all of the things that are a part of your life have gone, where do you go to? And if you don't have some structure or some template to work yourself out and then to see and provide a template for others, then I think we really are in a cynical position. So, you know, I'm quite well aware. You know, I came out of television, and I can tell you, coming out of Hazel's observations, in the days of cable companies, okay, when cable was first coming out, everybody took the same thing. There's going to be no advertising on cable. It's going to be the alternative to commercial television. We are selling franchises on the basis of this. And this was the idealistic belief, okay, except that underneath, who were the big sponsors of cable television? American Express, HBO, the people actually doing surveillance 30 years, 40 years ago on computers, okay, to see how every subscriber that was sitting out there was actually changing their TV channels and what they were watching when they were switching over, so that they could get the data that was necessary in order to sell more products. Okay, most people had no idea of this. Okay, right. So I think the notion of greed and of the acquisition of resources, okay, for your benefit or your institutional benefit have always been there. They will always be there. The question is whether you can come up with the alternative in your own life. Where I think the difficulties right now are, it's not whether you can be insured or not because your house is under thing or it's subsiding underneath you. The question is the degradation that has occurred, for example, in the soil, in the oceans, in nature, that requires a form of remediation that is absolutely enormous. It's not just a question of changing over. We've got to remediate what's been done. And the last, I mean, in Madrid came out, this report just came out that the oceans have lost a huge amount of oxygen, okay? And that the fish are now having to travel to the surface to find oxygen. Well, you know, when you
know why that is. That's because of the phytoplankton, which can't survive when the temperature goes up a degree and a half. It's all connected. And I mean, I think what you say, Ivan, makes me a little bit sad, and Hazel a little bit, because I think it sort of sounds like we are in the same system. And I'd first like to say thanks for correcting me. Maybe cynical isn't the right word, although maybe I am a bit of a cynic, and I'm certainly skeptical that we can change. And when I started, when I formally started this journey, because I think I've been on it most of my life, actually, even though I was a financial guy for a while. I don't know. I think we have a choice. We continue as we are. And we're beginning to realize that that's just not going to work, right? We're eating our food, we're eating our planet. And when I listen to you, Ivan, it makes me worried, because you go very quickly through 2 or 3 things which tell us we've actually run out of the resources to make the food. And I feel that every day when I go to the supermarket, because the food I actually put in my mouth is not nutritious. It's actually been bled of all of the nutrition in the food. The food that comes out of the garden here is a different animal. I can eat about 1/4 of what I grow to get the same nutrition. And I notice it because of what I actually put in my mouth. This has vitamins. What comes out of the supermarket is just marketing. So you worry me, because I think we're past the tipping point now. And so we are in a very, very rapid end game, if that's the case. So it's either business as usual, and then we have, I've always felt we either have the virtual solution, and this is running on the technology, the computers, the data, the Android, the cyborg, the Terminator. and I don't like that option. And then there's remembering that actually we're a part of nature. And I don't really see us appreciating that path. And that's what I've been striving for, to help people realize that we are a natural beast and we must nurture our home because we have ignored it.
I totally agree with you. So what would you invest in? Yes. So Tom, what would you invest in?
Okay. I've had this question over the last week, and I've advised my son, in fact, because he's looking at cars and stuff, and and he said maybe I should get that stock or something. And I think what I would advise people to do is to invest in themselves. Okay. I would advise them to invest in themselves, in their education, in their homes. I would advise them to invest in fixed assets around where they live, things which they can use and build. You know, get a handsaw, get a hammer, get a bit of wood, make a shelf from it. Because investing in somebody else's business is fine, but that's a luxury. It's somebody who's miles away, they're building empires, and the way they run their business is a feudal system. It's a totalitarian regime where people have to show up at a certain time and leave at a certain time. So that's what I would say about investment. Sorry to say that. If you want to invest in a small business, I think small businesses are great. We're very lucky. We actually have one of the owners of one of the small businesses, which has allowed me to survive because he can weld the hitch on my tractor and he actually can redesign it on the fly in his shop. And those sorts of things are small local things which make a community thrive and become alive.
You can also invest in co-ops. I'm invested in co-ops, and they're just as good as an investment as you can get in your life. And I agree with you, Tom, that that's the way I invest, in the most local possible, where I can kick the tires and be part of it. So yeah. Look, I'm sorry, but I am going to have to move on now, and I have totally enjoyed being able to get together with you guys.
Hazel, you've been wonderful. I would like to leave you with one thing before you go, if I may, because I thought Ivan was going to ask me what would I do, and I have one solution for everybody. And I want to share this as widely as possible because it's got nothing to do with money and everybody can do it. And my solution is simply to breathe. And if people can learn to breathe and take a breath, that will help them be themselves. It enlivens the consciousness. It makes you aware of who you are. It helps you de-stress and stop worrying about the problems around you. And it helps you make the right choices. So I would ask everybody to just take a deep breath and share the love. Hazel, you've made my life wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and so wonderful to be with you all. Take care. Enjoy.
Bye, Hazel.
Bye, Hazel. Bye. Nice to see you again.
So nice to see you both again. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, that was great.
And now, can we go too, Tom? Because you need to now.
Yeah, we have to go and start drinking heavily.
Exactly. Go and have fun.
End on the subject of breathing, because that's really what we've come to. Great. And I want to give you guys big hugs as well. And thank you so much for joining, Ivan. You're wonderful. I hope to see you soon.
Yeah, no, sounds good. Okay.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Well, there we go. Thanks, everybody. That is the end of our webinar live stream, Chaos and Fun. See you on the internet or at Ballon Temple, our life laboratory. Goodbye.